Hello and welcome, everyone. I am Nick, and of course,
And
here
I'm
I
Donovan.
have, there we go. And we are here on our first new segment in a while, and we are calling this Creatures of the Multiverse. We will be exploring tabletop things of the creature variety, whether that might be a clan, a particular creature itself, or a species. And today we are starting off with a bang, and oh boy, oh man, this
This
makes
is going. Let's put this out there right now. This is a blanket, and I do mean a blanket um, warning. This group, this subject, is not for the faint of heart.
no,
All
no,
Black
it's not.
Spiral Dancers are one of the books that were published under the Black Dog label, if I remember correctly, and this was for adults only. The
Hmm.
subject matter is not for people who are extremely sensitive
No,
because it covers some very triggering subjects, everything from incest and pedophilia to rape and cannibalism. It is not like I said, this is one of those use at your discretion sort of things. So bear that in mind as we go through this. And if any of these or any subject that involves non-consensual anything bugs you, you might want to just skip this video entirely because nothing they do involves consent ever.
nothing. The whole thing is pretty much the Borg via werewolf, and that is the gentlest way I could put these guys. So the Black Spiral Dancers. So for everyone who is looking at the video version of this, that is their legacy symbol, and the new symbol from fifth edition looks a little bit more to a straight spiral around with thorns. Not as intimidating, but the legacy symbol looks chaotic and wild, which is what I was introduced to. So they have no faction to them. The nickname of the Black Spiral Dancers are either Wolves of the Worm, Black Spirals, the Dancers, or just Worm Wolves. And if you're wondering, yes, these guys are actually a tribe of wolves. Although if you looked at a picture of them, you would never guess. They look like something completely different. Maybe like the Wendigo in friggin' Until Dawn. I don't know. It's just a completely different animal. Black
So
Spiral
you're saying
Dancers.
that
Good.
considering black spiral habits
Uh huh.
and mating rituals, we're just going to put that in parentheses there,
Right.
um, and the things that they use in these reproductive cycles, let lead to a lot of inbreeding and mutation. I mean,
Sounds.
let's
It
put it like
sounds.
this.
It sounds
If
like
you think that your
Alabama.
college roommate was a dirty, nasty bastard, these guys fucking raw sewage and radioactive waste. Just
Pretty
throwing that
much.
out there.
Yeah. This is. These guys are pretty wild on all ends of their spectrum, and I mean that in the most literal sense. So Black Spiral Dancers are one of the tribes found in the world of darkness, also known as the Lost Tribe. The dreaded Black Spiral Dancers are the Garu, who turn to the worm, and the Garu is a completely different breed of animal at that point. And you know much more about werewolf uh, uh, tribes than I do. So explain to me what were the Garu like before they became the Black Spirals?
Well, before they were the Black Spirals, they were a tribe called the White Howlers, and they
Hmm.
descended from the Picts of, the United Kingdom. They were, well, I mean, basically they were like almost like albino, where pure, white fur, shades of white and light gray. Probably beautiful to look at until you realize the thing was, 1,200 pounds of I'm going to fuck you in the skull and eat you at the same time.
Right.
Werewolves are no joke.
The White Howlers
Like,
were one
and
of the original 16 tribes of the Garu, and their
this is
kinfolk
something
were the
with
Picts, like you said. Yeah, that's wild.
yeah, yeah, they were the White Howlers were something else. They were impressive in their time, but circumstances and the rise of the Roman Empire led to their fall. It wasn't really the fault of humans. Humans were a driving factor in that, but they were pushed there by other werewolves, namely the Silver Fangs and the Wyrm itself.
So they were really fucked from the beginning. It sounds like they were really pushed to that limit through all that nonsense they went through.
And on a subject that we will probably cover later, the same thing nearly happened in the New World when European settlers came in. Other than the whole, Europeans colonizing North America, there were tribes of werewolves that were living there amongst the natives that existed in those areas. And one tribe sacrificed themselves in totality, to one of the aspects of the Wyrm to save the others. Again, a story for another time. But this whole drama nearly played out in the New World, and it didn't because of the sacrifice of one whole tribe. And I'm not just talking about the wolves, I'm talking about their kinfolk too, which, for those of you who don't know, kinfolk are humans that are born of werewolves. Or, basically they had a werewolf parent and a human parent.
Well, there you go.
They have a touch. They have a touch of that spiritualness in them, but they aren't necessarily going to become a werewolf themselves. Again, a subject for another time because it doesn't really fit with what we're doing here. As far as I remember, the Black Spirals don't have kinfolk anymore. They use the kinfolk that once belonged to the White Howlers and then eventually destroyed them. Or they, those kinfolk eventually married into the other, married other humans or married into other tribes, and that legacy still exists. But is probably one of the rarest werewolves you'll ever encounter, if you ever do.
If you ever do. That is the key component here. It's because the origins of the Black Spiral Dancers and the White Howlers could be traced all the way back to the Roman Empire. That's a long friggin' time ago, about around 80 CE. And their most valiant enemies were the fierce tribes of Scotland and Northern Britain. So, like you said, around the UK. And while the southern... go ahead.
Ireland, Scotland, Wales, etc., etc. Those, all of that was Howler territory, and their kinfolks were there.
Right. And so while the southern tribes quickly fell before the Roman advance, the stalwart defenders of the north held off their assaults of the Romans for 2 centuries. Hadrian's Wall marked the furthest limit of the empire with a boundary of stone and mortar, and the edifice was originally constructed to defend Roman settlements from the raids of the northern tribes. So the last dance of the northern Cairns, though, depends on the White Howlers, a fanatic and dangerous tribe, like you said, stalking the Scottish Highlands long after the Imperium. The Howlers remained isolated in northern Britain, and this isolated landscape was also home to the Picts. So I'm guessing for a while there, the Picts, the Pictish warriors became kinfolk to the White Howler. So that was their kinfolk in relation, but in comparison to the Black Spirals, they have no kinfolk left. So like you said, they were just kind of pitching off the White Howlers and the kinfolk, if anything. Let's see. Aided by Pictish kinfolk, the Howlers were truly awesome in battle. They demonstrated courage and ferocity in action, and their greatest totem, Saula. Is that how you pronounce that? Because there's a D in there. I friggin' hate pronunciations of words, man. Represented these qualities.
Probably because of the languages that the Picts spoke. If you want a good example of one that's still alive, would be Gaelic. And if you've ever heard Gaelic, you'll understand it. When you see it written and you hear it spoken, they don't like a few other languages. They don't really sound the same. Like, for example, French. You can get a long word and you'll say part of it and you'll drop the rest off into a single sound, even though there's like maybe 3 or 4 other characters that are still there. Linguistics is its own subject. But yeah, the Pictish languages were... I would argue that they probably should have been spelt more phonetically instead of adding, letters that don't really make the sounds that that they suggest.
Right.
But again, I'm a big fat fucking nerd, so what do I know? Now, an interesting thing about this subject, the Picts themselves, where, if memory serves, they used to paint themselves. Not just the tattoos, but they would paint themselves with a blue paint that was made of, specific plants that induced hallucinations. So when Pictish warriors would do this, they weren't necessarily fighting you. They thought they were fighting a demon or a spirit of some sort or some other supernatural creature, which lent them a great deal more ferocity than they would normally have if they thought they were just fighting a man.
Wow.
But if you want more information on that, pick up a damn history book. We're here for the Black Spirals, not for, the historical society that they dwelt amongst.
So let's see here.
Trust me, it would be worthwhile. You can add some of that to your Black Spirals and maybe give them an interesting twist.
I agree, definitely. Let's see. The white-furred howlers fought without restraint, revealing in savagery and brutality in the most incredible, vicious sense. And rites of passage were the most arduous of these rituals, involving spirit quests into the darkest realms of the Umbra. And if I recall, the Umbra is pretty much the demon world in the world of darkness, isn't it? It's pretty much like the other side, almost, or the dark magic realm.
No. Banes do come from parts of the Umbra, but other spirits dwell there too. The Umbra is the shadow. It's the opposite of the physical world. Anything that exists here in the physical world has a spiritual mirror immediately on the other side of that mirror, so to speak. But the deepest, darkest parts of the Umbra are the places where things get a little more abstract.
Right.
Where here you can have in the closest part of the Umbra, like when you first step across, it'll look like, where you came from. It'll be an exact spiritual representation of where you were at the time.
Right.
But the further away you move from that location, things get less orderly and more abstract.
That makes sense, because you wouldn't be around the same area where you manifested.
In the shallow end of the Umbra, you'll see the spiritual representation of a cat in the Umbra, and it will be the spirit of a cat in every sense of what a cat is. You go further, and you're dealing with, the spiritual concepts of gravity, light, secrets, and other more esoteric concepts. To the point where, our normal, rational human brain can't even make sense of what we're dealing with, and that can drive you to madness.
Yeah.
But these guys would go into those deep, dark parts of the Umbra to retrieve things or learn knowledge from these beings.
So, let's see. So the Cubs proved themselves not only by defeating physical foes, but also by descending into the dark heart of the underworld to prove their worth. The greatest arena for these orders was a Malfian realm known as the Spiral Labyrinth. Picts knew the spiritual tradition of confronting these spirits as walking the spiral. Howlers used Gaia's blessing to travel further into the spirit world than any human mystic ever could. Now let's see. While we're on that,
that right there.
Mm-hmm.
Something to remember for those of you who are watching this because you're trying to learn World of Darkness lore for werewolf. Werewolves and Gauru in general are not purely physical beings. They're only half. The other half of them is spirit, which is why they can shapeshift, why they can, step between worlds and go into the spirit realm, and why they can barter with spirits a lot easier than a mortal can. Selves are part spirit. They're the werewolves themselves are dual-natured, and that does cause its own issues. But in this case, this allowed them to go to places where normally their physical body would not hold up. The Umbra is a dangerous place, and physical beings being flung into the Umbra run the risk of being permanently, rendered incorporeal and unable to come home.
Right.
But yeah, Malphia was one of the darker places, and even in modern World of Darkness lore, the Malphian realms themselves are the stuff of nightmares in the most literal sense. Like, imagine the most horrific thing can, and that would be like the equivalent, the Malphian equivalent of a Sunday dinner. A good wholesome family moment.
Right.
Like that, the Malphian realms themselves harbor some of the most horrific things that you could, beyond your imagination, the kind of thing that could damn your soul should you witness them, let alone experience them. There's no coming back from that.
Right. So, while the White Howlers were masters of shocking violence, the Worms legions were more subtle. Many thought that continual assaults on the realm of Malpheus would strike at the heart of hell, weakening the Worms' strength and purifying the bonds of their Karens. Unfortunately, Banes from outside the Malphian realm had already began to seduce and possess their Picts kinfolk. Slowly, they tainted the Picts, stunting their growth and corrupting their minds, while the werewolf rulers of the tribe maintained the purity of their own blood. Their Pictish kinfolk became bestial and degenerate. So from this point on, legends differ. From modern Galliards believe that the Worms servitors spawned in the Scottish moors faster than the White Howlers could slay them. Others relate that few enemy spies within the northern Septs betrayed the Howlers to their undead enemies. Allegedly, vampires and the Garu, they subjugated open moon bridges to call down diabolical allies in these tales. The loyal White Howlers were completely overwhelmed, and the Worms' assault completely eradicated all traces of the tribe. So, if you were to run into a White Howler, it would be almost nearly impossible unless there's some ungodly, one in existence somewhere. Because this tells you that they're just fucked out. They're just gone.
And maybe for the tribes, this is a more convenient fiction. Because the idea that there are still White Howlers out there, those of you who play Werewolf, and know, for example, the Get of Fenris. You know how much of a powerhouse they are. The White Howlers made them seem like pups. They were way more badass and way more hardcore. Like whatever a Get of Fenris would do, a White Howler could do casually. That was the difference between them, and the idea that they have fallen to the Wyrm also lets you know that the Black Spirals themselves, they inherited that mindset. A twisted, corrupted version of that mindset. But it's still there. Those inclinations are still there, which is why when you look at the source material, like for pre-made campaigns, why generally you're not usually fighting a pack of Black Spirals. It's usually a couple mostly because a pack of Black Spirals versus your pack of ragtag, low to mid-rank Gauru are gonna die. And that's if you're lucky. The alternative is to be drugged back to one of their hives and brutalized in such a fashion that you eventually, die, or you just become a breeding vessel for them, or you join them.
Yeah, that's the only.
That's just their shit.
And that sounds a lot gentler than the friggin' Borg, because the Borg either assimilate you or they kill you, and that's it. You don't get the breeding part. So.
Well, the thing with the Borg is they'll at least salvage whatever they can from the encounter. The Black Spirals, they don't care about the salvage. For them, it's scorched earth. That's their go-to policy. The whole fuck around and find out. They skipped the fuck around part and went straight to find out.
Pretty much.
That's the best way to describe it.
And these guys are like ultimately like friggin' brutal. I mean, like I remember going up against them in your campaign, and that was just an encounter that I don't want to fuck with again. Not unless I build a fucking coyote that could take these guys out with tune physics the entire time, because that's the only way that's going to happen.
Well, you were a coyote. Coyotes tend to not be built for combat. For one, I mean, they can survive combat. I'm not gonna shortchange you there. I mean, coyotes, in combat are not frontline fighters. They're like trickster rogues, but squishier.
Yeah.
For those of you who get that reference,
Yeah,
they're all about the flash. They're all about the flash and not about the bang. But to tell you this now, I held back when you guys fought those spirals.
Oh, I bet. No, because there was no way, man.
That was really a one-sided fight, and I did not want you guys to, because I know how it is. You guys made those characters, and you made them with a lot of TLC, and there were some people who were a little disappointed in the end result, but everyone grew to love their character after a few sessions because, well, I gave you something to love.
Yep.
And I'm not a heartless bastard, usually. And I did not want you guys to, get all bad because you died horribly to Black Spiral Dancers.
I still really like my finisher to that fight, because I honestly didn't know if it was gonna work or not. I'm only thankful I got the rolls to make it work, because Jesus Christ, dude.
Yeah, you were skirting the threshold, and I kind of skewed the numbers in your favor a bit. I did that for all of you. I wanted you guys to feel just how dangerous the situation was. And I didn't want to entirely shortchange you, but at the same time, I didn't want to hand you the W, because it wouldn't have meant anything. Especially now, after all this time, I'm telling you this, and I'm telling you that I held back, and you're probably thinking, that motherfucker, that shit was not easy. You held back? Yes.
No. You don't understand. When you explained to me about the Black Spiral, even before the fight, I already thought to myself, if you don't hold back, it's a TPK. And I thought about that the entire time, and you saying that, I'm like, well, yeah, I know you held back. You had to. There was no fucking way. You probably wanted to see them go up in a flash of light with that nuke, so you probably held it back enough so we would have fun fighting them without dying. And I thought about that the entire time, and in the back of my head, I knew that's what it had to be, because there was no fucking way.
Three Rivers battle, right?
Yes.
And that was meant to be that fight was meant to be a schlog. It was meant to be brutal. Like, I wanted to emphasize the raw brutality of the lifestyle and the stakes that were there, and that hive was dangerous. But at the same time, you guys were also playing around in time, and what you thought you were changing, you guys didn't really change anything. You played out what happened. What your guys' mentor had ultimately lived, you guys got to live as well.
Right, that makes sense. Yeah.
But with such a large cast of characters at that point, it was I didn't throw everything. I wanted there to be more wolves there, which would also mean that when you guys did fight, it would be a little easier. Because again, pack tactics. You guys, if you get separated, you're boned. But with so many on both sides being there, no one group is going to be trying to single out one to cull from the herd just to kill them. Because, while you're singling out one, someone is singling you out and coming out you from behind. So it was sort of just a fucking melee.
Right, exactly.
A little bit of command, battlefield going on there. And the fact that there were more than just werewolves there.
There were way more than just werewolves. It was just a really, really cool battle. And for all those sitting at home listening to all this, what did I do? I literally ran in with a fucking nuke made from the time period we got sent to, and I ran in and literally slam dunked it into the hive hole of a bunch of Black Spiral dancers, and it went off fucking miraculously. And if you're wondering how I survived, I ended up gaining a shirt earlier in the campaign that actually activated and put me into Toon World to make me survive. That's the only reason why I did. But it was a really cool...
Essentially, I gave him a fetish that was a t-shirt with, I think it had Wile E. Coyote on it, too.
It was actually a wolf howling at a moon.
Yeah, it was a retro 90s t-shirt.
Mm-hmm.
For all those of you who remember the 90s art, which is now considered somewhat retro, the early 90s CGI art of a wolf howling at a moon. I remember now.
It was really cool.
It wasn't a wolf, it was a coyote howling at the moon.
Oh, coyote, yeah. And it was
the idea was that it was imbued with abilities from the spiritual abilities came from the Toon Zone in the Umbra. So he was able to, it activated and allowed him to survive like he was in a fucking old school Looney Tunes cartoon.
And you're thinking of Wile E. Coyote because that was my character's name, was Wile.
Well, I think that was the name you chose for yourself because you were born a coyote. You weren't born from a human. You were born from a coyote. So you were learning a lot of this stuff on your own. You learned a lot of stuff on your own. You didn't really have anyone to teach you.
Right.
And then working with the wolves, put you in a position to learn a lot more. Even though you weren't quite I can't think of it. But we're a little off topic. The point is that, it was a giant clusterfuck free-for-all, and I kind of pulled the punches partially for the narrative, because I didn't want to kill you guys, and it could have happened very, very easily. But, it also, because up until then, you'd heard about them, but you hadn't really encountered them.
Right.
So when the fighting started and you were watching some of these, you watched a lot of werewolves die. Oh, I mean, you guys weren't standing there watching it, you were fighting it, but you bore witness to a lot of smaller packs of younger, not as experienced werewolves as you guys, just being torn to pieces. Like, they had no chance.
And there was that.
You guys had more of a chance than them, and you guys had next to no chance if I was playing straight. And, that being said, those Black Spirals don't hold any sort of honor at all. They will do whatever it takes to achieve victory on whatever field they choose.
It is straight violence, and is nothing but violence. It is a straight-up slobber knocker. Okay. Running back into this, though, but so as their heroes' journeys into darkness became more perilous, the warriors who returned understood many dark mysteries of the underworld. Blasphemous revelations tested their sanity, and glimpses of insight. Some survivors argue that the worm was not a force of corruption, but merely one of balance, and those who rejected the idea responded with overwhelming rage. But, as the Howlers indulged in violence, forces unseen preyed upon their kinfolk, and the tribe was never destroyed from without. It was corrupted from within. So they were just straight up like corrupted all the way through their uh, through the fallen of the heroes and going deeper into the worm. And here we go. Here we go. The last Karen to fall was the Sept of the Mill Deep Lock, an island where the purest members of the tribe ruled over the White Howler werewolves. Elders looked out over the bleak moors of Scotland from a high peak at the center of the lake. When they learned of their brethren's treachery, they tried to summon reinforcements from distant septs. But by then, it was too late. Outriders could do little but watch, and as wave after wave of wormish forces assaulted the sept's defenses. When the sept was finally defiled, black tendrils reached out from the depths of the lake and dragged the tribal elders into the underworld. Jesus shit. Destiny awaited them in the greatest gateway to the Spiral Labyrinth, a Malfian fortress known as the Temple Obscura. There, the last heroes of the White Howlers prepared for spiritual corruption. In the weeks that followed, though, the Romans were driven back past Hadrian's Wall, but at a perilous cost. The Picts had secured their Scottish homeland again, but their Garo guardians had fallen prey to the conquering worm. The Karens of the north became breeding grounds for Banes, which werewolves immediately bound into worm-tainted fetishes. Eventually, the elders of the tribe returned from their final journey into the depths of Malfias, but when they did so, they emerged as werewolves of the Black Spiral tribe. So, all happens in the Roman Empire. That is their literal, that's their literal origin right there. And these guys
fighting the Romans and vampires and the worm all at once. The worm kind of, basically dicked them over, and they were corrupted.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
Okay.
And talk about getting it. I wonder if the worm bought them drinks first.
I hope so, man. Jeez. In the Dark Ages, in their early struggle, the Black Spiral Dancers were mostly confined to the Scottish territories. The arrival of Chaldean the White from the Silver Fangs started several campaigns against them, in joint ventures with the Fianna, who had learned of the fate of the Howlers through one of its last tribe members. God, how do you fucking pronounce that? Korok? That's the only way I can pronounce it. Korok. And with the Get of Fenris, unfortunately, these three parties squabble as much as against each other as they fought the worm-tainted spirals. Garo and kinfolk bred within the tainted lines of the White Howlers and amassed enough worm taint that they deserted their former tribes to join the Black Spirals in their tunnels. Fucking shit. So they were just like, fuck it, we're just gonna join the Black Spiral Dancers. They just ain't no way, man. Black Spiral Dancers were hit hard by the Inquisition, though, and mostly forced back into their underground tunnels. Most took this as a lesson and dedicated themselves as the preservation of the Veil, if only to protect their own interests. During the Age of Exploration, quite a few hives emigrated to the New World to find new places of corruption to nurture away from the eyes of the Garo nation. Okay. Let's see here. The Victorian Age. Oh man, the Victorian Age, such a classic time of history. But it still bugs me in the weirdest ways, like how the Black Spirals were able to survive this whole time, and just they're friggin' like relentless, man. That's why I wanted to touch on this first, because the Black Spirals interested me the most out of everything we encountered in any tabletop I've done so far. I mean, this doesn't even take the weird shit that happens in Deadlands, this fucking just takes the cake for me. And I've played a few things of Vampire and Mage and stuff. The Black Spirals are just fucking nuts. Like, they're just, like, just friggin' just wacky in the most weirdest sense.
I mean, their whole point of view of if violence doesn't solve your problem, you didn't use enough violence, is kind of scary. Considering, like in a human, that's a scary concept. But, put 2 rounds in their head and they drop. You put that in something that can eat a 9mm bullet because it tickles, that pretty much changes the power dynamic there.
Yeah, like just a little bit.
But even vampires, only dick with werewolves when they absolutely must. Very few vampires, see werewolves as easy prey. You still know about Black Spiral Dancers, and those that do are either in bed with the Wyrm directly and are glad to have them as allies, even if they don't fully trust them, or they realize just how much more dangerous they are, and they make sure to yeetus the fuckus outus anytime they hear a whisper that there might be Black Spirals nearby.
Right.
Like, that's gotta tell you something there.
Tells you need to get the fuck out ASAP. But yeah, no, like I said, like the whole concept of the spirals are nuts to me. It's just I love the lore for them. The Black Spiral Dancers thrived in the colonization of America, mainly in the conflict between the pure tribes and the Europeans. Oh boy. Black Spiral cultists practiced 4 rituals in the woods, stalked the unprotected colonies, and sought foolish mortals to abduct and suborn. By infesting careful chosen Europeans with worm taint, they brought fresh blood into the sinister black covens of their kinfolk. Men and women of weak virtue were also offered places of honor in the tribe's orgiastic. Okay, I see what it is. Tribes orgiastic. Orgiastic procreation rites. Yeah. God. One of the greatest legends of the tribe's unholy.
For them, they're not really doing the one-on-one solo thing. Like, they go to a bar, they pick up a chick, they hit it and quit it. No. When Black Spirals go to make babies, everyone is in there, and their mother, especially their mother. They're... But I think there's a famous painting of hell that depicts a kind of orgy. It'd be the closest thing that you could come to for what they do. Because they don't stick to their breed forms when they mate. They will change shape however they feel in the moment. So you might start off fucking that chick, and the next thing you know, you're fucking a weird, lumpy wolf creature, and then a werewolf-ish looking creature, and so on and so on. Your partner isn't necessarily going to be the same partner throughout the whole thing, and they may not always be human.
Right.
Because sometimes they'll take Fomori. They'll bring fucking Fomori, which is what happens when you take a really fucked up person and they become possessed with a bane. They become a Fomori, a subject for another time. And they'll sometimes bring those things into it, and that is, considering what some of their things, Let's pull like this. For those of you who understand ick factor, you don't know what ick factor is until you've read the fucking Fomori book.
Right.
That defines what is disturbing on a sexual level. And yeah, they have a whole section on that. We'll get into that some other time. But yeah, Black Spirals are not pair breeders. We'll leave it at that.
One of the greatest legends of the tribe's unholy activities concern the village of Roanoke. There, Black Spirals harried and hunted the isolated colonists for months. summoning Banes to spread madness and hatred. The demented werewolves performed the bidding of the Eater of Souls, an aspect of the worm that physically manifests itself in the fields outside the colony. Its efforts continued until the members of one Garu tribe, the Croatian, overcame the local black spirals. The Croatan overcame the local black spirals and sacrificed themselves into the very maw of the worm. Despite this, the entire village was destroyed. Though human history does not offer an account of this tragedy, the bloodshed that resulted is recorded in the Garu epic known as the Croatan Song. Others made careful alliances with other creatures of corruption, namely Sabbat vampires on the path of evil revelations.
Yeah, we touched on this one earlier when I talked about the tribes of North America and how something similar to what happened to the White Howlers. The Croatan were the children of Turn, the Great Turn.
Mm-hmm.
When that happened, they were the ones who fought the Spiral. And they were the ones who fought the Dancers, and they knew that the Eater of Souls could only be sated by feeding it. So, in order to send it back into the Deep Umbra, back into Melfia itself, they had to feed themselves to it willingly.
Mm-hmm.
And when they did this, and eventually we will cover the Croatan at some point, and the Croatan Song. For the first time in its existence, it was stated, and the Eater of Souls withdrew of its own free will. After consuming an entire tribe of werewolves who sacrificed themselves freely. Every man, woman, and child. Remember, serenade for a minute the level of sacrifice that is required to willingly feed yourself to an abstract concept like that. Because if they hadn't, well, history of the world would be a bit different. Because the Eater of Souls would have continued. Would have devoured the Croatan anyway. And given that it's an aspect of the worm itself, its power level was incalculable. We're talking on the level of gods. We're talking god level power here. There isn't another force in the world of darkness that could have beaten it, except possibly if the tradition, if the Council of Nine Traditions had gotten together, or had been really there in any sense at that time and had known that was going on. They might have been able to do something about it, but that would have had other effects that we can get into at another time.
Right. So, the final nights. This is now caught up to speed. So after the dawn of the 20th century, the Black Spiral tribe found another method of spreading the worm's influence. Wherever the earth is poisoned, Banes thrive by spreading toxic waste, radiation, and filth. These warriors' eco-terrorist activities despoiled and corrupted the wild. In recent years, Black Spirals have begun infiltrating extreme environmentalist organizations as part of this crusade, exploiting the hatred of truly fanatic activists. The advent of Pentex and its associated subsidiaries also aided their cause, especially when Walk-In Sewage managed to organize several biohazard strikes across the American East Coast. During the mid-1980s, the first Black Spiral dancers climbed the corporate ladder and began to insert themselves into Pentex in ways beyond simple skirmishes. The evolution of the Black Spiral dancers continues. Only a century ago, Black Spirals only formed about 1/14 of the world's werewolf population. Now, they're equal to 1/10 of the Garu population, easily outnumbering any other tribe. The Black Spirals are the only tribal society that is growing instead of decreasing, thanks to their uninhibited breeding practices, recruitment of discontent and outcast Garu alliances with other supernatural factions and higher birth rates. Absolutely insane. There is literally no stopping these guys unless you just take them all out, but that is a fucking hell of a fucking fight, and I would not dare anyone to go up against them, because Jesus Christ.
The concept of a monster you be, lest a monster you become, comes to mind when dealing with Black Spiral.
And looking at a Black Spiral Dancer, I'm just saying, looking at a Black Spiral Dancer picture is just fucking horrifying, because these things look more like demons than they do anything else.
And the thing is that they're not you can look at each of the tribes, and you can look at them all, like tribe by tribe, and you can see the genetic similarities between them, because they all have a particular breed of wolf that they descend from, that are their chosen that are their chosen kinfolk when they're in their wolf form. You know what I mean?
Right.
They have a shared heritage with a particular breed of wolf. Well, Britain doesn't have wolves. The British Isles don't have wolves, at least not anymore.
Right.
And you can only imagine what they had once upon a time. Now, that being said, with their breeding practices, the level of inbreeding and the involvement of mutagens and toxic waste, that picture that you see that you saw is by no means a typical Black Spiral Dancer. You can get 1,000 Black Spiral Dancers in their Crino swarm and stand them together, and no two of them are going to look alike.
Right.
But you can get 1,000, for example, Silverfangs in their Crino swarm, and outside of scars and certain patterns to their fur color, you can tell that they all come from, a similar species wolf. Again, this is something that they have done to themselves. They know that, they're basically the Wyrm's shock troopers and foot soldiers. And the only way to beat their enemy is to breed them out. And they have succeeded in that regard. If all the nations of werewolves got together and fielded their best soldiers, their best warriors, the Black Spirals would have more. And they would be more ruthless, more bloodthirsty, and more eager to kill. Not subdue, but kill indiscriminately.
Right.
And they would win every time, hands down. Like the Garu heroes always win when they fight the Black Spiral, but at great cost to themselves. For every pack or every hive they take down, so many more Garu die. And the spirals that survive are the ones that realize that this was a losing cause, and it makes more sense for them to move on and breed more.
Right.
If you don't completely catch a hive, by surprise and completely wipe them out in one fell swoop, that means blocking them off from, shifting into the Umbra. That means using any, blood magic or whatever. If you don't completely cut them off and kill them in one stroke, that hive will eventually spawn other hives from the survivors that got away.
And that's just more terrifying than anything else. It's just absolutely, like I said, hearing and listening to all this other lore that we know about other tabletop games and what we've done, this is still hand down one of the scariest motherfuckers that I know about personally, and it's still a fucking hassle to just fight these dudes, even just one. I mean, I feel like I'm watching a fucking anime villain, kind of, like just take on a bunch of heroes, and it's absolutely just wild to just listen to that. So, just a couple of little things about these guys, or whatever. But Black Spiral Dancers are organized into septs called hives. Cairns, where they raise their young, are called pits. And Black Spiral Dancers have lived underground among foul and cancerous children of the worm for centuries. Their hives are nestled amidst labyrinthine cave systems, most of which are filled with industrial waste and monstrous things. Tribal culture, which I'm surprised these things even have a culture. The dancers are quite insane and usually sadistic. However, the worm has given its slaves terrible powers of their own, as well as a violent hatred for the Gaian Garu. The average Black Spiral Dancer has a short and violent life, their goals bringing them into a direct conflict with the remaining Garu tribes. Black Spiral Dancers roughly resemble other Garu, however, many of them are malformed, either through metis birth or close proximity to the radioactive balefires of the worm. The heads of their crinoforms are often huge and slavery-jawed, resembling a hyena's, while their ears are frequently hairless and pointed like a bat's. Their eyes are huge and round, glowing with red or green luminescence, while their fur is patchy and usually either albino white, grayish-green, or jet black. Black spiral human forms are usually twisted and deformed, but some are quite beautiful. And that is just kind of just wacky for me. It's just, I mean, I'm using very little words for this, but Jesus Christ, man. They have a political culture, which I'm looking at it and I still doubt it. There's religious culture, and then there's a W20 timeline, which I don't know what W20 is, and I don't know what W5 is. Can you care to explain that?
Okay, W20 is the 20th anniversary edition of Werewolf, which they did a few years back to mark the 20th anniversary of the games coming out. The first one they did was Vampire, which was V20, and then they did Werewolf and then Mage, which is they took the core book for Werewolf and they took the different subsequent books that, came out during their run and comprised them into one book and then gave it a more modern spin. So, for example, back in the 90s, when these games were, at their apex originally, certain things like certain skills and abilities changed, so they updated it for that. Also, they added new merits, flaws, resources, etc., to reflect the millennium and the changes that have happened in the world since 1999. And, of course, a few canonical things, because, 1999 in the game sense was supposed to be the beginning of the apocalypse, the end of the world, when the forces of the Wyrm and the forces of Gaia would finally have their last battle and they would just figure out who the winner was.
Man.
But yeah, W20 was the 20th anniversary edition of the original line. The W5 is the 5th edition version, which, you've seen the Vampire 5th edition. So it's that, but for Werewolf instead of Vampire. So they did some fundamental changes to that, some of which I get, and others were like, I'm scratching my head, like, who wouldn't do that? But again, we can get into that another time. But yeah, if I were to choose an edition to play, I would probably go with the 20th anniversary edition, because, okay, you can get very munchkin-y with it, not gonna lie. It doesn't matter which book you're playing with, whether it's Vampire or Mage or Werewolf, you can get very, very munchkin-y with it, especially if you know what the fuck you're doing. But the D10 system is fun to play with. You just need a lot of D10s. The changes that they made to Vampire, the addition, like, for example, the addition of the hunger dice instead of a blood pool, I kind of like that. So, And since I don't have a 5th edition werewolf book in my possession, I really can't speak to what changes they made for the werewolf 5th edition. As mechanically speaking, I only know what I've read. You know how I feel about things I read on the internet. They may blow my mind, but I don't necessarily believe them.
So I'm using whitewolf.fandom/wiki/black_spiral_dancers. I want you guys to check these out for yourselves because the lore of werewolf, vampire, mage, the world of darkness in general, from what I've experienced, especially through Donovan, has been one of the more cooler, enriching things I've learned, and that has been really super cool for me, and I've enjoyed really looking into these. So I highly recommend you guys use these for your World of Darkness games. Get into World of Darkness and experience it. Even as a new player, find someone who can teach you this game. And I'm still learning it even after playing it a bunch of times, and the systems kind of get to me because I'm so used to playing D&D that it's such a wild time, but this is so neat and just great to learn. Do you know anybody on YouTube, Donovan, that actually does Black Spiral covering besides us?
Nothing comes to mind immediately, but there are a few lore channels whose, at the moment, names escape me, but they do lore specifically. They don't really do live play. But there are some live play podcasts, like Canada by Night, for example. They do a 5th edition Vampire the Masquerade game set in Canada. The characters are all based in Canada.
Okay.
I know that there are others, but that's the first one I've come across, and I've enjoyed listening to them, although I need to get back in there way behind. But for werewolves specifically, I'm sure there's some podcasts out there for that. But like I said, mostly on YouTube, it's been lore stuff. Like Lazar of Stygia, I believe that his name is. He does lore videos for the old World of Darkness, which is what this falls under. There are 2 different worlds of darkness. There's the old World of Darkness and then there's the new World of Darkness. The base systems are the same, but mechanically they vary. They changed a lot of stuff between these 2 versions.
What did you call him? You call him Lazar of Styria?
Stygia.
You know how to spell that? Like I know
off the top of my head, no.
Lazar.
The last thing by him that I watched, he did a whole lore breakdown on Wraith the Oblivion, which is one of the old World of Darkness books about being dead and being a ghost.
There it is, Lazar of Stygia. Yeah, there he is. He's got a whole playlist.
He covers the clans. He covers the tribes. Like he did a whole thing. Like I said, he did a whole. He
does Exalted, New World of Darkness, COF, current World of Darkness, top 10 werewolves, World of Darkness history, vampire clans. Yeah, this guy. If you want something else to go into besides listening to our podcast and YouTube channel, I highly recommend Lazar of Stygia. This guy looks like he's got all his shit together for the World of Darkness.
He does. He's thorough and entertaining at the same time.
That's good to know. That's really good to know. Yeah, I like the look. I like the cut of this guy's jib on his channel. That is definitely a fun-looking channel to get into. So I highly recommend it as well to get into. And then, of course, just look up World of Darkness and lore, and I'm sure you could find quite a few dudes out here doing the same thing, and probably also giving you a good experience as well. So, go ahead and head over to YouTube. Go ahead and check out our YouTube channel as well, which is Tabletop RPG. And there you will find, things like, the any board games and stuff that we're playing as well. and check them out for yourself, as those are usually pretty fun when we do them. And our Fabletop channel also contains live games that we play on occasion, aside from all of our fun YouTube and podcast-oriented stuff. So yeah, just take a look at everything, and we hope to see you guys, on our next video, which I believe we're going to be doing dragons. So you guys just wait for it. You're going to love it.
Yeah, do try to enjoy yourselves. Peace.
Peace.